folks, welcome back to the Africa. This is Chris once again. Hello, folks, and welcome back to Chris Wide Africa. Now, why is my screen doing that? Something odd. We've got Kendall centered. Let me do the view here and change it. Gallery view. There we go. Welcome back to Chris Wide Africa here at the Indaba Africa Broadcasting Network. Today, the 26th of May, 2021. My guest today is Kendall Qualls, an Army veteran, a successful businessman, ran for Congress, and now responsible for a group in Minnesota. I'm not sure if it's going nationwide, but a group in Minnesota that is trying to correct the narrative about Black America, Black American families, and what's really happening in America. And I hope that that's a just description of a little bit of your background, Kendall. So welcome to the program. And can you tell me if I got anything wrong there?
No, you got it all right, Chris. So thanks so much for having me.
No, it's my absolute pleasure. I came across your group because I was unfamiliar with it. I saw a news story, which I think someone was pushing the story around on Twitter, although I don't spend much time on Twitter. It's a bit of a cancer, but I did come across it, and you were citing figures. And one of the things I've talked about for years, and of course, you know the deal, as a serving Army officer, I really can't do things publicly that I talk about. But since my retirement, it's a little bit of a different story. I've told people that one of the cancers in our society has been the single parent family. And that's not to attack single parents. Single parents do heroic work, fantastic effort to try to raise their families. But the reality is when there's not someone there to share the workload with, to mentor, to teach, to share the domestic work, to share the breadwinning, all that, it makes a challenge. And one of the arguments I made for years is that one of the real challenges in the Black community now, and for people who aren't too familiar with my channel, understand I did grow up in communities where I was very much a minority. Housing project, 300 families, 3 were white. I've been on that side of the fence. I've lived in Africa, of course, in Africa, a very different status. I was a diplomat most of the time, so I kind of had life good, but still a minority in much of Africa. And I've also went to high school in an all-white county. Not because Black folks weren't invited, but because they were smart enough not to live in rural Appalachia. They found somewhere else to live. But so I've had all kinds of experiences. But one of the things I've told people for years is that now my figures are slightly off, so I'm going to have to take a closer look at the data you guys put together. But I said for years that over 70%, and for a while the numbers I saw said 78% of Black children, whether born to 2 Black parents or to a mixed race, but those considered and identified as Black, were born out of wedlock. And then immediately when I would say that with, my pink complexion, oh, you're a racist. No. I'm just pointing out the reality here. I'm not condemning. It's not a moral judgment. I'm just stating that this is a potential problem in a community. And then I would point out that Hispanics were 45% was the case. And whites 40 years ago, whatever white is, 40 years ago, the number was less than 10%, but it's over 25%. And Asians, where it was non-existent 40 years ago because of socially conservative Korean, Chinese, Japanese families in America, you didn't have out of wedlock marriages. And so that was very much frowned upon. But those are the numbers I use. But for Asians, it had jumped up to 9%, whites 25%, Hispanics 45%, and Black Americans 78%. But my numbers are off. And for the Black community, it's a little bit better. But for everybody else, it's worse. According to the numbers I saw you guys put together, I'll give you a chance here in a second. Asians like 11%, almost 12%. Whites are 28%. It's almost 1 in 3 white children are born out of wedlock. Hispanics are 54%, so over half of Hispanic children born out of wedlock, and now 70% of Blacks. I mean, did I get that wrong, or is that data correct? That's pretty frightening.
Yeah, that data is correct. It's updated. 2019 data actually has it, and it's from the U.S. Census Bureau. So all the data, all the information I use is published data. Here's a striking issue behind that, Chris. So it's not just the data. So you and I are old enough to remember that Black Americans didn't used to live like that.
No. They took great pride in family and faith.
That's right. And it was centered around cultural roots of faith, family, and education. So in our lifetime, the Black community has gone from approximately 80% two-parent families to 80% fatherless homes in one lifetime without one national initiative to reverse it until now. We're going to do this in Minneapolis.
Well, and you're doing it in the private sector. This isn't a government-led effort. And that's what is reassuring to me and comforting, because there's so many efforts, by the government. We're going to fix this. We're going to fix that. And it seems like government only makes things worse.
Exactly. In fact, this initiative, one of the catalysts that got us here was a good intention government program. And what's again, it's so striking, and I put this in the category of evil, is that you might have good intentions when you rolled it out. But after the first decade, the third decade, the fifth decade, when you saw the calamity that this has caused, There was never an attempt to reverse course. Let me just say this out loud, because this is what the program does. Mm-hmm. It incentivizes women to have children out of wedlock as long as they remain unmarried. So it's a financial incentive to have children unmarried, and that money keeps coming as long as you're unmarried.
It's absolutely
that undermines. It is perverse. It undermines the very idea of a civilization, and undermines the very core essence of who we are as Americans.
Well, and of course, this gets twisted in so many different fashions by those who oppose those who are in favor of the nuclear family. We hear that typically one argument come up is that, well, you're homophobe. What does that have to do with the nuclear family? Oh, because you oppose gay marriage. Who said they oppose gay marriage? Well, and this thing goes this way and goes that way. Or if you deign to actually mention that so many black children are born out of wedlock, and that might be a problem, whether you're white or black, well, you must be a racist or bigot. And this I think it's toxic discourse, and it's been building for decades, and now it's just really out of control in this country.
Well, here's the thing. I'm not going to let the naysayers get in the way of helping us to restore something, because I've gone into the black community, and part of what we're doing here in Minneapolis, and as we spread this across the country, I'm recruiting moms and grandmoms, because the one thing that I say, that regardless of political background, that they get and they want to be a part of this movement, is when I say that God did not intend for women to raise children alone, all heads nod up and down. They get it, especially if they live their life for themselves. And so part of the people that we have in our organization that's helping us move this are moms that were former welfare mothers, that were on public assistance. They got off, and they're spreading the message. I got dads that used to be gangbangers and that found faith. And really at the center point of this is really a faith-based movement. The black community used to be a God-centered culture. And it wasn't until we were told, our lives are changed, prosperity will happen if we elect a black mayor, and then a black congressman, and a black senator, and a black president. Well, we've done that for 50 years. And we turned the culture away from a God-centered culture to a government-centered culture. And basically what we're doing, we're going to turn that back to where it was.
Well, I think you've hit it right on the nail, the nail right on the head. You said we've turned from a God-centered culture, which is the history of America. Whether you believe in God through the faith of Islam or Judaism or Christianity, it was a God-centered faith, but it's a faith in government. It's not to delve too much into this because, censorship is real on this platform. But I mean, just the implicit faith that people have in the government from an official from the National Institutes for Health, who everything he's shared with us has been factually wrong time and again. And we're told to believe him implicitly. And when you simply report what the gentleman says, then you're taken down for medical misinformation. It just shows people running around attacking people in stores for not wearing facial coverings and things like that because they believe with the government. It's almost like they worship at the altar of the government. The government is their savior. And it's really backwards to me because human beings, whether we came from the Garden of Eden or evolution or whatever people believe in, we didn't just rock up with communism and socialism and capitalism and democracy and republics. We formed those things to represent our interest. And somehow this whole thing is backwards around the world and America now, where we exist for the government, and it's supposed to be the opposite way.
Well, it's definitely supposed to be the opposite way. Here's a situation, like if you're a student of history, like many military officers are, here's the thing what the founders said. Self-government only works with a virtuous and literate population. So in their different writings and different letters, they'll mention that because it is self-government. We don't need the government telling us something. However, if you have a population like here in Minneapolis and a lot of inner cities, and it's coming in different forms in suburban, they're not getting an education, they're getting an indoctrination. But in a lot of major cities, you're looking at less than 50% of kids graduating from high school. Again, education used to be paramount in the black community. Literally, American slaves were beaten just to learn to read. They're learning to read. The Brown versus the Board of Education in the 50s, all of this was for a better education. But now they're purposely turning this around so they can rule over us instead of us ruling our own lives.
Well, Earl Weber, who is from Jamaica originally, he ran in Congress out there in Los Angeles. He got wiped out by the leftist opponent there because that's a machine. But he did run for Congress, and he's running now for governor on the recall of Gavin Newsom. But Earl Weber grew up in Jamaica where it was dangerous. His family became targeted. They fired an RPG into his father's house. Both of his parents were professionals. They made a good living. He had a good life there, but they feared for their lives. So they fled to America. They came, and for whatever reason, they wound up settling in Baltimore, which is where I'm originally from. And Earl told me when I interviewed him last year before the election, he said, the thing that struck me is that I went from a place where it was dangerous to come to a place where it's supposedly safe. And in Jamaica, the focus was on achieving, on learning, on educating. That's what you had to do, no matter who you were. Even the poorest of kids were trying to get good grades. Where he came to Baltimore, and it was all about who could knock up who was the baby mama, who's dealing these drugs, who's doing that, wearing your pants down around below your waist, and actively being proud of the fact that you're not achieving in school. And he's just like shaking his head. He's still trying to get through school. And Earl shared with me from his high school years, can't say graduating class because about 9% of Baltimore students actually graduate. That's not a made up statistic, by the way. It's pretty low. But
Right.
He said from his classes in high school, only 2 or 3 guys are still alive. They're all dead. This is, of course, a black community. That's heartbreaking.
Well, I tell you, I wrote an op-ed when we launched Take Charge Minnesota on January 18th, Martin Luther King holiday. And in that op-ed, I basically said Martin Luther King would be rolling in his grave because education was paramount in our culture at the time. All the things that they worked for, was in order to give my generation, I was born in 63, to give my generation the opportunity to live life as a full-fledged American.
Yeah.
And guess what? I did. The formula works. It works. But what happens is that you have an elected class that they gain their power from keeping those uneducated, uninformed, and keeping them where they are. And if you know world history, this is no different from all over the world from world history. Yeah. Those in power want to stay in power, regardless of the demise of the people they're supposed to be serving.
Well, what frustrates me the most, Kendall, is the insulting nature of it. I mean, honestly, these politicians act as if black Americans have no agency, as if they have no capacity, no ability for success, and they're naive waifs that need to be sheltered and cared for and protected by laws that give them advantages. And then when you point out the obvious disconnects, then people just shrug it off. I mean, I don't care who plays in the NFL as long as it's good football, though right now I'm not watching the NFL, and the same in the NBA. But when you pause for a moment and recognize that 13.5% of America's population is black, whatever black is, mixed race black, we'll say black, 13.5% is black, but 78% of the NBA is black. Yes, I know there's a few Africans in there, but mostly black Americans. Now, wait a second. If everything's supposed to be equal, then 76% of the NBA should be white guys, right? And the NFL is 65%. I don't care, again, who plays in those leagues, just the best players is what we want. But the point is that if the system is rigged against folks, then that doesn't explain that. It doesn't explain the multitude of general officers and admirals we have in the military who've achieved success. They weren't put there by quotas. They weren't put there because we had to have a token black person. They were put there because they had the ability, ostensibly. And the ones I've worked with, that's certainly been the case. It's very frustrating to see how these politicians are so insulting towards black Americans. At least that's my view. Do you feel insulted by the way they act?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's insulting. But again, what I'm trying to do is disprove their narrative. And we're going to do it through actual real lives and changing the culture. So I'll give you an example. I've been in healthcare for over 30 years in my civilian career at national level, and I've seen national data. Mm-hmm. And when we look at these isolated incidences of you've talked about the over-indexed percentages in professional athletes, well, we're also over-indexed in all the wrong things.
Oh,
we are number one in obesity, diabetes, hypertension,
high blood pressure. Yep.
We're 12% of the population, to your point, but we have the number one cases in HIV and STDs, and it's not because of such bad. These are two-parent family disrupted. It didn't used to be this way.
Yep.
And when you look at these cases, when you look at these patients, 95% of them come from fatherless homes. We have a fatherless home problem in our country, and it's growing in other demographics. If anything, I'm the Paul Revere of this country. I'm telling you, look at us. We're the canary in the coal mine. It's coming to your neighborhood. It's coming to your families next, because the left, the progressives, they despise one thing more than they despise the Chevy Suburban. and it's the nuclear family and the coming for your family next. And so as we start this revival, if you will, of going back to our core roots, it's a recommendation for all people across this country in the United States. This country was founded on self-government, self-ruling class. You can only do that through virtue, and you can only do that through a literate population. It is in God we trust, and stamped throughout all of our documents in our country. It's not in Fauci we trust. It's not in your elected official we trust.
Definitely not. Definitely not in Fauci we trust. That's for darn sure. At least when he said you shouldn't wear a mask last year, when people were talking about that, I was explaining why, because there was a shortage of masks. I knew, I'm not in the healthcare industry, but I've worked with it. I knew that there was insufficient number and with a reason for it. I said that. He just said, well, it doesn't work. And people got, and we lied to people, you know? So anyway,
That's
but
right.
no, but so what you just said there, it resonates with me this way. And so please tell me if I got it wrong. But I mean, this is not an organization that you've put together for black folks. It sounds like it's an organization for America, for Americans to, and as you said, and when you say we're the canary in the coal mine, I think you mean the black community is the canary in the coal mine when it comes to all these ills that are tied to not having a nuclear family.
Well, absolutely. You know, the reason why I'm organizing again the black community, because we're further down the line. Again, we were from 80% two parents to 80% fatherless homes. It's coming to your neighborhood now, because in the United States, for the first time in American history, 50% of all births in the United States are to unwed mothers under 30 across all demographics.
Wow. I didn't know it was that high. Wow.
First time in American history. So if you look at the school shootings that we've had, like 25 of the 28 of the last those major ones, those young boys, young teenagers, troubled homes, fractured homes, stepdads, fatherless homes, same issue. So it's a dynamic we have to address. And look, I don't get religious. I'm not a religious zealot. But I'm going to tell you, there's something there, and why faith has been always a component that made the United States very different. We don't need a hierarchy to rule over us as long as we are a virtuous and literate population.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because for years, people have asked me, of course, I did multiple tours. I spent 23 of my 36 years in the Army overseas, including 8 tours in Africa. And people always ask me, what's the secret recipe? What's the success for America? And I say institutions, and then they immediately go, oh, you mean the Supreme Court, Congress? I'm like, no. Those aren't the institutions I'm talking about. I'm talking about the boys clubs, the Better Business Bureau, the American Bar Association, American Medical Association, what was the Boy Scouts America, the Girl Scouts America, right. Campfire Girls, and people of faith, religious institutions, B'nai B'rith, and all these different things that really bind us together. We voluntarily come together and accept standards of conduct and behavior, which really, and of course, Alexis de Tocqueville in Democracy in America said this.
That's exactly
right. So it's
right.
not like I'm a rocket scientist. I came up with this. I actually was smart enough to read Alexis de Tocqueville as a young man, and he was spot on. And I've seen it in my life experience. And those institutions, in many ways, have been undermined by the federal government, which constantly intrudes. I mean, you see the people in Oregon who refuse to bake a cake for a same-sex union. And they were sued and they were fined because they refused. It was a private business. The government has no right to intrude there, but they did. And that goes across all of society and affects these institutions. And when institutions that we voluntarily agree to live by standards are weakened, what do we have? Nothing but the law that the government puts out there for us.
Well, to that point, that gentleman that refused to bake the cake, actually, that went all the way to the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. He won the case. But this is how progressives are. They went back and they sued him. They wanted to make a demonic cake or something like that. Mm-hmm. It is literal harassment. So that idea that we used to agree to disagree, mm-hmm. and we would part ways, it's no longer that. It is a harassment of, we're going to shut you down regardless. And then what that is far left progressivism that is now taking root in this country. And unless good people stand up to evil, stand up to it, we'll lose our country. I'm standing up to it. And I tell people, look, I was 19 years old when I gave an oath to defend the Constitution against enemies, foreign and domestic. And that oath has no expiration date.
Agreed. Absolutely. You know, it's interesting, Kendall, because when I was a kid, like I said, I've lived in all kinds of circumstances. Grew up in, I went to a school in Buffalo, New York, in which everyone, for some strange reason, I don't know why, but there were a lot of Puerto Ricans there in that poor neighborhood I lived in. I mean, if I was from Puerto Rico, I think I'd want to live in Puerto Rico. It's a lot nicer and warmer than Buffalo, New York. But all my classmates were Puerto Rican. They spoke Spanish, of course, because they grew up with it. I didn't speak Spanish. I just moved to Buffalo. Who knew it was a Spanish-speaking neighborhood? And so they didn't speak to me during recess and breaks. And so what did I learn from that? Did I learn that people who speak Spanish are racist and disrespectful? No, I just learned that I was new and hadn't quite fit in yet. But when I kind of got off track there. But what I want to say is that when I grew up in these different circumstances, and I lived around black folks, boy, I'll tell you what, you didn't sass your mom. You didn't sass your grandma. You show respect to women, and you listen to what your father said. I mean, obviously there were exceptions to that, and we've always had exceptions, but by and large, people were respected. Come Sunday, woo, boy, black folks were in church, and they were in force. They were there, and that was the norm, because I remember we moved to the housing project, and we weren't churchgoers, and people looked at us like, what's wrong with you all? And well, we started going to church after that. But point is that the respect, the authority, the value of the family, and the value of faith was so strong in black communities. And these are communities that honestly, for centuries, have been oppressed, have been neglected, have been ostracized, have been kept from things, and they succeed and they survive because of the nuclear family. And they, when, of course, during the slavery period, a lot of nuclear families were torn apart. But the point is that nuclear family, that need, that desire to keep it together in the black community is what helped black Americans get through the darkest of times. And then there's light at the end of the tunnel, and it all goes to crap. What happened?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. There's a lot of black leaders in our communities that collected the 30 pieces of silver. And again, what we see is blood in the streets, and they got blood in their hands. And, I know this is recorded. I understand that. But it's the facts are facts. If I was leading an organization or a community in a private sector, and I had the kind of results that some of these elected leaders had results, I would have been fired year one. These people not been there just year one, year two. I mean, decades, literally decades, and overseeing this. And they point their finger at white suburban America. And I can tell you from the inside and see this, it is traditional white conservative Christians are the ones that have founded some of these schools in these communities that gives these kids a ticket out of poverty. It is not the public schools. It is not the leftists that are starting these charter schools and private schools that are giving kids an option out. It is the people that they point to that call racist that are actually doing it.
Absolutely. And what we always see is the easy or simpleton analysis, as I call it. I call it coffee table analysis. You go into the dentist office and you're sitting there waiting to get drilled on or get your teeth cleaned. And they've got these coffee table books with lovely glossy photographs in it where there's no real analysis. There's nothing wrong with coffee table books. I got a whole nice collection of them, especially from Africa. But my point is coffee table analysis is not helpful. So when I was a kid, we were told that people in Baltimore are all racist, No doubt there are racists, white and black in Baltimore. Trust me, there are. But everybody's racist because all the white people are racist because they all left the city. The white flight to Baltimore County. And that's what I grew up with hearing. And so as I got older, I'm like, okay, all right, maybe that makes sense. But then we saw a phenomenon start in the 1980s and 1990s when black folks in Baltimore started to move up the socioeconomic ladder and get higher paying jobs and be more successful because of the systems that were put in place. And suddenly, all these black folks moving out to Baltimore County. Why were they moving out there? Because the malls are out there. There's space. They don't have to live in row houses. There's no drug dealers on the corner. So it wasn't racism. It was socioeconomic opportunity. And as soon as black folks got the same chance, they went to the same place.
And guess what? It's safer out there, too.
Of course. And that's why they moved out there. I mean, and you can't blame folks. And you see that. You see, people always, it's like, again, I was joking early on when I said I went to a high school in rural Appalachia. I wasn't joking about that. That's true. But what I was joking about is that, black folks are too smart to live in that depressed part of that. There are black folks in Appalachia. But the point is that historically there weren't any black folks that went there. Not because they were excluded. It's just not a place where black folks went to. I mean, much of America's black population lived in the Deep South until we had the two major migrations in the 20th century. I mean, there were always blacks in the North, especially because there were a lot of free blacks in the North. But the mass migration took place because of the two world conflicts and employment and such. Changed things, but it didn't change things in the northern states. It changed things in the urban centers in the north, and so you still have lots of counties in the Midwest and in the Plain states that are overwhelmingly white because of the demographics. But it's to me it's always this simpleton analysis, and people blame this and blame that without actually doing critical thinking. And I think that goes back to a point you were talking about, Kendall, about education. we have so many people in our country today that seem to be incapable of critical thinking. Not being critical, well, they're all capable of being critical, but critical thinking and picking things apart and going, wait a second, they're telling me this, but that doesn't make any sense because I saw this.
Well, there's two things to that one. I can just share with you. I tell people, we, especially on the 30-year-olds and some 40-year-olds, we have a lot of people with degrees but very little education.
Bingo.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's one. The critical thinking skills pieces has gone, and we've gone to groupthink. The second part of this is it's very easy to take a look at this analysis. Again, the progressive left does not want to promote two-parent families, the whole idea of the nuclear family. When you look at poverty rates in the United States, I have one of the slides that I'm educating a group of suburban parents tomorrow. I'm going to have nearly 300 people on this Zoom training session. One of the slides that I share is look at poverty rates across demographics, Black, white, Hispanic. It doesn't matter what ethnic group. When you look at the nuclear family, the poverty rates drop down to single digits across the board. When you look at poverty rates in fatherless homes, in the Black community is 35%. It drops to 7% nuclear family. Now that could be two wage earners. It could just be one wage earner. But the idea that you got a nuclear family is the same way in all other demographics. If anything, if I was a policy wonk at any government agency, city, county, federal, promoting marriage would be the best thing to do for a community. You lower poverty, all your government services decline. Things are better for these kids. Because even from sexual abuse and child abuse, it's always higher in these fatherless homes. But again, the idea of bringing that together, the nuclear family, it is not what the progressive left wants. They want people dependent and loyal to the state.
Absolutely. That seems to be the case. I agree with you 100% there. It's, well, I'll look at these overly generous 72-week long unemployment compensation, which is actually hindering our economy now. Well, my state representative here, Dawn Kiefer in Pennsylvania, state representative, she went and testified recently here in Harrisburg, and she said that, we don't have a labor shortage. And I agree with her. I've been saying this for a while. And now others are saying the same thing. It's not a labor shortage. And John Stoss reported the same thing. It's a workforce crisis. The government has perversely made it more profitable and better for people to sit at home and collect a check than to go back to work. And nothing to do with lockdowns and restrictions, but the fact that people, many people, when you take in, childcare and transportation cost and time lost, hey, it's a lot better to get a couple $100 less or a couple $100 more and let someone else pay for it. That is so perverse, and it undermines the dignity and value of work, which has been a cornerstone of our society, and also to the nuclear family.
Well, absolutely, Chris. And so that's why we're taking the initiative on this. Again, we have a lot of people that have recovered from getting a bad start in life. They have a great message to tell their own personal testimony. And then how do we connect with people? And I always say that the Republicans, the people on the conservatives, I tell people, I make a joke about it. They couldn't tell you I love you without an Excel spreadsheet. So we're connecting with people in the community, both head and heart. Mm-hmm. We have all the right messages. We have all the data that supports our narrative, but we just communicate it in such a lousy way. Not now. We're moving forward with our organization. If you've seen our videos on our website at takechargemn.com, that's takechargemikenovember.com, you'll see some of our videos that connect head and heart of what we're trying to do with our movement.
Folks, you're listening to Chris White Africa here on the DABA Broadcasting Network. My special featured guest today is Kendall Qualls, a Army veteran, a huge success in the healthcare industry, and the president of Take Charge. I got it right. I always want to say Take Charge, correct?
Take Charge. It is Take Charge, yes. Yeah,
Take Charge, based in Minnesota, and he's trying to help restore the nuclear family and bring America back from the brink. And a lot of folks assume that he's just looking at Black communities, but it's America at large that he's trying to get the message out to there. I'm going to ask you some more questions about the organization shortly, but I did want to go back to a point you raised early in this discussion, and it's come up a couple of times. It's interesting to me, Kendall, that for decades I've been overseas working with USAID and with other actors, non-government organizations. And we're always trying to help countries, get control of their birth rates. Some countries like Uganda and Niger, both of which I've been stationed, have astronomically high birth rates. My driver at the embassy in Niamey, Niger, he was talking to me one day, asking questions about his life, and he was telling me how he was one of 38 children by his father. Now, that's a lot of kids to feed, so that's a big thing. But one of the things that we've seen for decades, and that you look at the data, there's no question about it, whether it's Asia, it's Latin America, it's Africa, is one way that birth rates come under control and families become stronger units is through education of girls. And if girls get through primary school, birth rates decline demonstrably. If they get through middle school, more, through high school, even more. But the biggest jump is just getting girls through primary school. Looking at the abysmal rates of graduation and education standards that we see in our major metropolitan areas in this country today, it seems to me that maybe somebody needs to start honing in on the fact that we need to educate girls about their bodies, about their rights, about our political system, and about where they fit in society, in our schools, and maybe in our churches, synagogues, and mosques as well. But there seems to be a disconnect there. Do you think that I'm onto something? We need to focus on, well, not just girls, but guys, but especially on girls to try to get this under control.
Yeah, and that's one, again, part of our movement. We recruited moms, grandmoms, and they're going into community. So we have strategic partners that have after school programs, Salvation Army. We have other programs that have over 150 to 200 kids that come into their centers after school. And what we're doing, we're going to young girls, and we're basically saying, when a guy asks you out for a date, when you get old enough, who says yes or no? Well, that's right. That girl does. That's when they want to ask, hey, let's move in together. Who's going to say yes or no? So it's about empowering them so they understand that they they can say no. Mm-hmm. But one of the things we're also going to do, we're going to reconstitute that whole value of marriage and bringing in the marriage expectation back into the community. And again, like a public service announcement, we're going to make marriage cool, both for young men, what it means to be honorable man in this country, and especially in the Black community. And also in the idea of marriage for these young ladies. It's because of that artificial injunction that the federal government did in the Black community in the 60s, where marriage rates decline now to less than 25% in the Black community. And again, it's something that we're going to reverse to help promote the idea of not just getting married, but that whole idea of marriage and the relationship between man and a woman.
So let me ask you this about your organization. I mean, where did the idea come from? Is it your idea? Was it someone else's idea? Or did you guys brainstorm one day and go, there's a need for this?
Well, the idea actually came from the issues of my campaign. It's the test of my life. My dad was a career Army guy. Mm-hmm. When he came back from Vietnam, he divorced my mother.
Wait a second. Wait. You're okay. Yeah. Your dad was a career Army guy. Well, I'm sorry. Is he black? Was he black? Is he black?
Yeah, he's black.
That's not possible. Black folks aren't allowed to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, no. It breaks the narrative. It breaks the narrative.
Sorry.
Yeah. So I grew up in a divorced family. We lived in Harlem during the late 60s. Mm-hmm. It was the epicenter for drugs, violence, gangs. The United States in the late 60s, early 70s. And so the idea that you talked about, where did it come from? It's basically a testament of my life. Unfortunately, my brothers and sisters got absorbed into the street culture, the lives that they live, much like what you hear in Baltimore and other cities. Mm-hmm. But for whatever reason, I took a different path. I got an education. I tell people, and I got 3 graduate degrees, and I tell people, 2 of those graduate degrees are from Oklahoma. I tell people that I don't have an Ivy League education. I got a tumbleweed education, and. And I got an MBA from the University of Michigan, mm-hmm. at top 10 business school. And I did well in my career. Mm-hmm. And I said, look, I'm humble enough to say, look, I'm no one exceptional. I live in an exceptional country. I serve an exceptional God. I'm a Christian. And if I can do this, anyone can. And look, I tell people in this country, it doesn't matter where you start in life, mm-hmm. because you don't have to stay there in your life. There's a pathway, and unfortunately, it's not promoted as an option or as a venue, as a travel channel, if you will, from the left. What the left promotes is, here, sit down, I will take care of you. We'll give you the crumbs, and if you get in trouble, it's not your fault. It's the system. It's the man. It's someone else.
Yeah, someone else is to blame, not your shortcomings and your failures.
That's exactly right. And it is, again, it undermines the value, I think, of human dignity, number one. It undermines the value of this country and what it's all about. this country is about the masses. It's not about the elites.
Absolutely, and that's what's so frustrating for me. It's because it's the elites that are driving this narrative in media, in news, in newspapers, in Hollywood, on television programs, in technology now even, and in government. I mean, how does Maxine Waters represent a district where the average income is less than $30,000 per year when the GDP in America is $67,000 per year, and she has 4 or 5 houses there, and she doesn't even live in her district? Where does that come from? The last time she worked in the private sector was like 35 years ago. So I know what her salary is. I'm not accusing her of anything, but the fact that did you see that Senator Patrick Leahy has decided he's going to run for a 7th term in the Senate? 7th 6-year term, or not 7th, ninth term, not 7th. Sorry, I lost track. 9 terms. These elites feel that they're entitled to have this lofty position and that we exist for them. And I think that puts our country in trouble. So it's nice to see someone at the grassroots like your organization. Now, are you guys self-funded? Do you get support outside, or how's it work?
So self-funded. It's amazing how far we've spread. I have now 9 states that have asked, can you start a chapter here? We've only been around for 5 months.
Are you serious? 5 months, and you've got
5 months.
Wow. Okay. So when I look it up online, and I didn't put the link below the video, maybe I did, but if I didn't, I'll make sure it's in there so people can find it later on, because a lot of people watch this after the fact. But when I look up your organization, it says it has MN for Minnesota, but the intent is to be nationwide? Is that what you're hoping for?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So, this idea, we're going to launch here in early fall. I have a coming soon around our prodigal project. So the analogy of the prodigal son. And you know what? I hope that is that's going to be something that can be taken up, not just within the Black community, but from everyone. You know what? We have drifted away from our core values. Okay, whether you're religious or not, but it's time to come back to the basics. And come back and understand that it is fruitful life in this direction. There's things that your parents told you shouldn't be doing. And there are people realizing, yeah, you're right. But now they're coming back to the basics. That's the whole idea of it, because it is a rewarding life when you do it the right way.
Well, you've just you'd open up another topic I was going to ask you about. It's almost like you're reading my mind here. It's a little scary, but so you just mentioned something, and of course we've talked a lot about faith and family here, and family is the key, the crux, the cornerstone of what we're talking about here. But it sounds as if you have a big tent, and people who maybe not of faith or not of deep faith or devout faith, it sounds like the tent's open for them as long as you share the values of the nuclear family. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, absolutely. I came to the Christian faith when I was 27 years old. I remember one of our pastors saying, "Look, even if you're not a follower of God, even if you don't go, when you follow a life that's consistent with those values, you get blessings from it." So it is something that we all have had for a long time. I tell people, look, when you think about the blessings that we've had as a country, the freedoms we've had as a country, we're living off of our grandparents' fumes. And I'm strong. I'm little enough to remember, going under the oven or the stove and, having to relight the pilot light because the pilot light went out.
Me too.
and so here's what I tell guys in this country: the pilot light has gone out, and this generation has to crawl under, get dirty, roll up our sleeves, and relight that pilot light of freedom for our country. And it is rooted, again, it is interwoven between individual freedoms as well as faith.
It's interesting because the irony is lost on the left. For instance, I came back from Ethiopia in 2015. This was after Trayvon Martin and the Ferguson hands up, and then Freddie Gray and Baltimore, all this stuff was going on. And of course, the media I can see overseas is international. You would think that America was in the midst of a race war and black people and white people murdering each other in the streets. So I get back here, and then we see the University of Missouri, these students in a dormitory, the common area, downstairs where the television is and people can sit there and eat and congregate. And white students and black students show up to show solidarity over the Ferguson shooting. And then the black students tell the white students they have to leave.
Yeah.
Excuse me? I thought we were all one. What? And then we see out in Seattle and Chaz, the so-called not insurrectionist Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, which was, that was clearly insurrection. As soon as these people establish their own authority over it, what's the first thing they do? They segregated a blacks only section. What? What did I miss here? I thought we were all trying to work together and be one team. Why in the world do they not see the irony of we've been trying to work towards unity and open doors for everyone, and they're trying to close doors for people? That just seems bizarre to me.
Because it's the American way. What Martin Luther King is. I tell you, if Martin Luther King was alive today, he wouldn't be in this crowd with these guys.
No, he'd be crying. He'd have tears. You remember the Cody, Iron Eyes Cody, the Sicilian American who was dressed up as an Indian to do that pollution commercial back in the 70s?
Yes.
And he stands there and the tears come down. I mean, I can just picture Martin Luther King just heartbroken over what's happening. Even Malcolm X would be heartbroken, I think, over where it's gone, even from his radical position. This is absolute insanity. And the worst part, I think, Kendall, and if you disagree, please tell me, I think it's stemming from a place of ignorance. Most of these people are, now some of them are intentionally demonically doing this and lying. They know they're lying, but some are just ignorant. They're just sheep that don't know better, and someone tells them something and they implicitly believe it. It's scary.
We have a lot of degrees and very little education.
You said that before. You said it again. It's a good point. So your organization, 5 months old. Wow, that's amazing. That's got this kind of resonance already. And you mentioned that you've got people who've becoming part of the organization, who've turned their lives around, former gangbangers, drug dealers, people who failed in life, and for some reason they came back. Is there any common catalyst? I'm sure every individual case is different, but is there anything that kind of brings these folks back from the brink and they buy into the reality that they need to change?
Well, number one, the Christian faith has done one. And guess what? In capitalism, I'm going to tell you, there is nothing I think Ronald Reagan said this once before. There's nothing more valuable than a job. It is the best social program ever because it brings dignity. It brings respect. The idea that you can take care of yourself and a family just brings so much honor and to someone that you can't get in a government program. And so these guys, I'm humbled to know them. I'm honored to know them. I've never met any of these people before, and all these people are highlighted in the videos that we're having. So if you ever got a chance to experience in the PragerU video library, we're doing the same thing, but these are stories about real Americans that have turned their lives around, and we're promoting the idea of marriage and everything. We're making it fun and cool, but we're going to win America back with the hearts and minds of what this country really stands for. And we get the same privilege. And Chris, I'll tell you this, just like you, I work at a global job. A lot of people come to this country from all over the world. And, when they get their citizenship, when they post on social media, whether they're from Nigeria, Togo, China, Japan, even France, you know what they call themselves? And when they highlight themselves on social media, guess what? I'm an American.
Yep.
I am an American now. You know what? We need to have that same type of fever with natural born Americans. They have no idea the privilege that what they've been born into, and it's been belittled and indoctrinated to be belittled who they are when everyone else is celebrating that idea of being American.
Absolutely. And we came so close to losing this republic and having a divided part of this continent. And if I see correctly behind you, I can't see the whole thing, but that looks like the 20th Maine at the Battle of Gettysburg. Is that?
Wow, you know your history. That's right.
Well, I'm a historian and a political scientist, but yeah, that's the 20th Maine, Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. And that was the moment that saved the republic. There may have been others in that war, but if that wing had been turned on the Union Army, the Confederates would have rolled up all the way through the woods and taken out the Union troops in the rear. Meade would have been routed,
Washington, D.C.
And D.C. would have been captured shortly afterwards. That moment behind you is a pivotal moment in our history, and people should be proud to be an American. Did we have slavery? Yes. Did we have indentured servitude? Yes. Did we conquer and colonize and settle? Yes. But don't apologize for it unless you participated in it. Recognize it, remember it, and talk about it. Now, here's something that let me ask this question. This always disturbs me. Black Lives Matter talks about so much about how important Black lives are and how much they care about it. And okay, I'll listen to that argument. But why are they so silent on the fact that a disproportionate number of abortions in this country every year are from mothers who are carrying Black children, mostly Black women, but also some white women? 300,000 abortions in the Black community every year. That's a shockingly high number. And they're burning cities over 308 people who get in altercations with law enforcement and unfortunately are shot by police in 2019. And that's what started all this nonsense. But 300,000 children aborted in the black community. The reason the black community is not declining in numbers is not because of natural reproduction, because abortion's having a big impact on that, but because of immigration. We have about 3 million black Africans who've come here from Africa and the Caribbean in the last 30 years. Otherwise, now the percentage is getting slightly slower because others are growing faster. But the black community was always the largest minority in this country until the last decade. And these abortions don't help numbers.
Well, to your point, Chris, not only the abortions, but again, I've been in healthcare for over 30 years. The number one cause of death, and CDC tracks this data on the health of Americans every year, and they publish it by demographic. The number one cause of death for young black men, pediatric population, 1 to 19-year-old, is homicide. Homicide, not police shootings.
Right.
Right. This is black on black crime,
black
homicide.
Yeah.
We just had this happen just last weekend in Minneapolis. 3 kids. Issue about Black Lives Matter. We just released a video this morning. Mm-hmm. It is the biggest sham since Bernie Madoff. They don't care about Black lives. And in fact, we have a former founding president of Black Lives Matter chapter in St. Paul, Minneapolis, St. Paul, that founded it. After a year and a half later, he got a chance to see the inside of the belly of this thing. He resigned because he found out they don't care about black families and black lives. All it is a political hack movement. And I could tell you right now, in our country, not just Black Lives Matter, there's the whole critical race theory, all the proponents of it, and people that are unknowingly, promoting it. It is the biggest sham since Bernie Madoff and what he's did in this country. They're trying to weaponize our kids against us. Literally weaponizing our children against the very nature of their country.
Well, they seem to be having a lot of help, whether it's LeBron James or it's Major League Baseball or the National Football League or it's music or it's Hollywood. They seem to have a lot of help in undermining our country. Are you there? Kendall?
Yes, I'm here.
I thought
you're absolutely right.
I thought maybe when
some of these people...
I thought maybe when we said Black Lives Matter, we got cut off.
Yeah, we got hacked. Yes.
Yeah.
No, some of these people are unknowingly, supporting it. They're naive and don't get it. They're too far removed because of their wealth. Mm-hmm. There are people that are absolutely orchestrating this whole idea, and Black Lives Matter is just one segment of it, as well as Antifa. Mm-hmm. But believe me, this is totally orchestrated to shift this country's values and beliefs to something it was never intended to be.
What I find interesting about this, Kendall, is that when I have conversations with people who are on that side of the aisle, when you can actually have a conversation, because you often can't, they just start attacking me. But when you can have a cogent conversation, you find that they're virtually devoid of any knowledge of American history. They hear a few facts. 1619, America was founded on racism. Actually, the colonies began before 1619, but that's another story. But when I was enlisted in Germany in the 1980s, I went to the Ed Center to take the CLEP test. If you remember, there's a college level examination program to get college credit. Now I got one for English, so I got 6 semester hours, one for social studies, and stuff like that. Well, they had a test for African American history. Well, I knew American history. I'm into it. So I went and took the test. Of course, there was no internet. You had to wait weeks for the mail to come back with the results. So I went to the Ed Center, picked up my results, went back to motor pool. And in the motor pool, in that signal unit that I was in, it was about 1/3 Hispanic, mostly Puerto Ricans, and 1/3 white, 1/3 black. So we were an interesting organization demographically. But I went back and guys, hey, Wyatt, how'd you do, man? How'd you do? I said, well, no, I did pretty good. What's your score? And I forget the scale, Kendall, but I think it was like 80 was the max or something like that. And I got like a 78. And like, whoa, man, how'd you get such a high score in African-American history? And without missing a beat, at the age of 19, I swear to God, this is what I said. Because it's American history. You don't know this stuff? You never heard of Crispus Attucks? You don't know about the Underground Railroad? You don't know about Cleveland, the inventor of the traffic light? You don't know about George Washington Carver? Yeah,
right.
People don't know these things. They don't know about Madam C.J. Walker. Apparently, there's a movie out now about her, but no one ever heard her before. Or the first black female pilot in this country, who unfortunately died in an aircraft crash. But it's fascinating to me that these people who profess to be standing up for a group of people know nothing about their history and about the group of people.
And I think one of the greatest ones of all, I think, was Booker T. Washington, who they don't know about, and the left doesn't want people to know about him either. He literally got kids out of Tuskegee University. His kids graduating from his institution were getting jobs in the rural South, in the segregated South, and right after the Civil War and Reconstruction era, without a diversity program, without affirmative action, because they had marketable skills that the market needed. He understood that more than anything else. And, you know, he was marginalized as throughout out of the history books. And this is a guy that had preeminence during the early 1900s. He got invited to England to meet the Queen of England. He was an advisor to 2 different presidents. There was a coin that was a commemorative coin that was stamped in the U.S. Mint in 1946. Before affirmative action, before diversity,
before civil rights,
prominent person, and very little people know about what he did and the significance of what he did and his writings and his teachings.
No, Booker T. Washington was amazing. Now, W.E.B. Du Bois gets more attention, and he's more of, I think, a mixed character. He's still a great American, but politically, he was, you know, anyway. Well,
he was the nemesis of Booker T. Washington. He came from the North. Booker T. Washington helped, you know, educate the, you know, former slaves, and not only the guy, he was. W.E.B. Du Bois was the first Black person to get his PhD from Harvard. Yes, that's great and that's wonderful. That's academia.
Yep.
It's not tangible results. How are you benefiting society? He became to hate this country. He became a communist. He denounced his citizenship, and he was on the board with Margaret Sanger in Harlem, you know, basically trying to curb births in the Black community. Total arch nemesis. I mean, bad guy, good guy kind of scenario.
Yeah, well, you know, you've gone into it pretty well. I wasn't going to elaborate on W.E.B. Du Bois because people think I just attacking him, but you hit it spot on. But Booker T. Washington was a great American. George Washington Carver, another great American, and people in this community know nothing about that. They know nothing about it. You have a conversation, you just get blank stares. They're like, I'm like, how can you be making arguments when you don't even know what you're talking about? Well, apparently It's pretty easy to do.
Yes. Well, here's the scenario we have, Chris, with a lot of people. You know, their history, you know, extends only to the furthest memory, and you know, they're experts in that, and they're devoid of everything else that you just mentioned.
Well, I think it's even worse than that. I think for a lot of people, their history extends to this week's tweets.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty sad. Well, listen, Kendall, it's amazing. I could probably go for hours having this conversation with you. It's here we are, 2 Americans, roughly the same age, in our 30s, who've experienced life in America and arguably been successful in all that we've done. It's a pleasure to have you on, and I'm going to reach out to you. I want to learn more about what you're doing, extending what you're doing. Maybe I can help out in some way. We'll see. But thank you so much for what you're doing, and thank you for coming on the program. Before we wrap up, any last thoughts or things you'd like to share with people? Anything hopeful, perhaps, a message?
Well, sure. Again, if you take a look at our website, takechargemn.com, that's takechargemikenovember.com, and we're going to win this battle. We're on the side of virtue. We're on the side of things that are right, righteousness, and we're going to win. And it's going to win because the average everyday Americans are going to stand up and fight back against this.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my guest today is Kendall Qualls, who is an Army veteran, a huge success in the healthcare industry. And that's the whole thing we talk about for ages. Maybe we get back and talk about that, about all the healthcare challenges in the Black community, which really affect it. You know, before I wrap, you know, I didn't bring this up. We'll do it for a future one if you want to come back. Is that, you know, when COVID and when other things happen, they go, oh, it's racist, without looking at the fact that you know, people who are most susceptible to are those with underlying immunocompromised systems. And when you look at the Black community, that's a big chunk of the community: obesity, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, HIV. I mean, if I was scared of HIV, the last thing I'd want to be is a Black woman, because they get it heavily. That's unfortunate.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
All right. Well, maybe a future conversation about that. That's something we could talk about. But thanks a lot, Kendall. I appreciate it. I'll let you drop off. And if you want to stay in the chat for a minute, I can chat with you, or we'll just catch up later if that works out.
Yeah, we'll catch up later.
Let's catch up later. I've got to get another stream going. So there's my guest, folks. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Kendall Qualls from, there you go. It's just dropped off there, from Take Charge MN, Take Charge Minnesota. He is trying to change the false narrative about America and about Black America in particular, but not just about Black America, but about the nuclear family and what's actually happening in this country and what needs to happen in this country. So I want to thank him as my guest for coming on. This was a very informative and insightful conversation. I enjoyed it immensely. And it was really a pleasure to have Kendall on. He seems to have his head switched on straight and is talking about important issues here. I didn't catch any of the chat, so my apologies for that. We got a couple minute late start there because I was in another Zoom session with Helen Zilla and Franz Kronia from the Institute for Race Relations and others in South Africa talking about Helen's book and about woke culture here in the U.S. and in South Africa. So, folks, if you're here for the news, please be patient and tune in. Give me about 5 to 10 minutes, and I'll start that stream after this. I've got to close this out and get started on that stream. So thank you all so much. Be sure to smash the like button. The audience continued to grow throughout the stream, so I'm glad that people were able to join us. And thank you so much once again to Kendall Qualls from Take Charge MN. A fantastic organization, which is only 5 months old, and that's pretty awesome. God bless, folks. I'll be back in just a short while. Just wait for the stream. I appreciate your patience. I have to make a few notes for the news headlines, and then I'll be ready to go, and we'll go live with the news. I'll also be on Ronaldo Hus later today. I'll be doing night owls, and then I'll be going to the local cemeteries to place flags on the graves of U.S. veterans. Thank you so much. God bless, and we'll catch you here shortly.